His secretary received a wedding dress she never ordered. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask that if you enjoy emotional stories like this one, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. It only takes a second. It's completely free, and your support helps us create more heartfelt and unforgettable stories that we'd also love to know where you're watching from today. So leave your city or country in the comments below and say hello. We truly appreciate your support. Now, let's get back to our story. The dress knew my measurements before I knew who had sent it. At 9:47 on a Thursday night, I was still sitting outside Alexander Sterling's glass office on the 47th floor, trying to rescue his Friday schedule from 3 executives who apparently believed calendars were suggestions. Rain slid down the Manhattan windows in silver lines. The cleaning crew had already passed my desk twice. My coffee had been cold for nearly an hour. I was 27 years old, 3 years into being Alexander's executive secretary, and experienced enough to know that working for him meant never assuming the day was actually over. My desk phone rang. Reception. Claire, there is a delivery for you. I glanced toward the empty hallway. At almost 10 o'clock. That was my question too. 5 minutes later, the elevator opened and a courier appeared pushing a large white box on a cart. It was nearly 4 feet long, wrapped with a charcoal ribbon, and addressed to Claire Bennett in precise black lettering. No company name. No return address. Who sent it? I asked. The courier checked his phone. No sender listed. He left before curiosity could become common sense. I stared at the box while rain whispered against the windows behind me. Alexander's office door remained closed. I should have waited until morning. Instead, I pulled the ribbon loose. Tissue paper rustled beneath my fingers. Then I saw white fabric. I lifted it carefully and forgot how tired I was. A wedding dress. Elegant. Expensive. Hand-finished. Nothing exaggerated, just clean lines, delicate details, and the kind of craftsmanship I normally saw behind glass on Fifth Avenue. This has to be a mistake, I whispered. I searched the box for an invoice. Nothing. Then I held the dress against myself. My stomach tightened. The waist aligned perfectly. The shoulders matched mine. The hem fell exactly where it should have. Someone had not guessed my size. Someone knew it. A small card rested beneath the tissue paper. Friday, 8 o'clock. Wear it. My phone vibrated against the desk. Unknown number. I opened the message. It fits, does it not? The office suddenly felt too quiet. I looked toward the dark windows and saw my own reflection surrounded by 47 floors of empty glass and city lights. I typed, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. No answer came. Behind me, a door opened. Claire. Alexander's voice was low and controlled. The same voice that could silence a conference room without becoming louder than anyone else's. I turned. He stood in his doorway wearing the black suit he had arrived in 14 hours earlier, his dark hair still perfectly swept back, his expression unreadable. Then he saw the dress. Everything changed. His eyes moved from the white fabric to the card in my hand, then to the small designer label near the collar. He stopped completely. I had watched Alexander Sterling negotiate impossible contracts without blinking. I had watched senior executives enter his office furious and leave speaking carefully. In 3 years, I had never seen genuine alarm cross his face. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "It was delivered 5 minutes ago." He crossed the room but stopped several feet away, as though touching the dress would confirm something he did not want confirmed. "Who brought it?" "A courier." "Who sent it?" There was no name. My phone vibrated again. Alexander looked toward the screen. Another message had appeared. "Tomorrow, 8. Do not disappoint us." Alexander read it once. His jaw tightened. Then he looked at the designer label again, and whatever he recognized there drained the remaining calm from his eyes. "Claire," he said quietly, "who sent you this?" Alexander did not answer my question because I had not asked one yet. I was still watching his face, trying to understand why a designer label could unsettle a man who treated billion-dollar negotiations like routine paperwork. He stepped closer to the conference table, but did not touch the dress. "Lock the office door," he said. "Why?" "Claire. That is my name, not an explanation." His eyes met mine. For a second, the old Alexander returned, controlled and impossible to read. Then he reached for his phone. "Daniel, I need 47 secured. Pull every camera from the lobby, loading dock, service entrance, and elevators beginning at 9:30. He listened. Do not involve building security yet. Use our people. Our people. I had heard those words before, usually when Alexander wanted something handled quietly. Tonight they sounded different. I looked at the dress again. You recognize the label. Alexander ended the call. Celeste Moreau. Who is she? A private designer. How private? He studied me before answering. She does not advertise. She does not accept walk-ins. Most clients need a personal referral. I glanced down at the fabric. So somebody spent a ridiculous amount of money to frighten me. Money is not what concerns me. Then what does? His phone vibrated. He read the screen, and his expression hardened. The cameras went offline at 9:38. I looked at the clock. The courier arrived around 9:43. The feed returned at 9:46. 8 minutes. 8 perfectly missing minutes in one of the most secure office towers in Manhattan. I folded my arms. That sounds convenient. It was deliberate. Then call the police. Alexander looked toward the windows. That hesitation lasted less than a second, but I caught it. Why are you not calling them? Because I do not know what this is yet. That sounds like another way of saying there are things you are not telling me. Before he could respond, Daniel appeared outside the glass doors. Alexander let him in. Daniel was in his early 50s, gray at the temples, calm in the particular way of men who noticed every exit before sitting down. He handed Alexander a tablet. Courier used legitimate credentials. The delivery request was entered at 8:52 tonight. Payment cleared yesterday. Source. Alexander asked. Daniel glanced at me, then back at him, still tracing it. I hated that glance. The one people exchanged when they believed information should be protected from me for my own good. I am standing right here, I said. Daniel remained silent. Alexander exhaled. Go home, Claire. No, Daniel will drive you. I take the subway. Not tonight. There it was again. Not concern. Command. I picked up my purse. You can control tomorrow's calendar. You cannot control how I get home. His jaw tightened. Then something unexpected happened. Please. Alexander Sterling said please so rarely that the word stopped me. I agreed to the car, mostly because the anonymous message was still glowing on my phone. Downstairs, Daniel stepped outside first while I waited beneath the marble awning. I opened the courier's digital receipt one more time. There had to be something everyone missed. At the bottom was a billing reference. I tapped it. A company name appeared. Sterling Strategic Holdings. I stared at the screen while rain swept across Park Avenue. 3 years working for Alexander had taught me every major Sterling subsidiary. I had never seen this one. I searched the corporate directory anyway. Nothing. Then Daniel returned and opened the car door. Miss Bennett. I barely heard him. The wedding dress had been paid for using a company with Alexander's name on it. And upstairs, my boss had looked me in the eyes and acted as if he had no idea where it came from. I did not get into Daniel's car. Not immediately. I stood beneath the awning with rain blowing cold against my ankles and stared at Sterling Strategic Holdings until the name felt like an accusation. Daniel waited beside the open rear door. Miss Bennett. I locked my phone and looked at him. Tell Alexander the first forgot something upstairs. I can retrieve it. Not this. I turned before he could stop me. 7 minutes later, the elevator opened onto 47. Alexander was exactly where I had left him, standing beside the conference table with the white dress still spread beneath the office lights. He looked up. Why are you back? I crossed the room and placed my phone on the table between us. Did you buy this for me? Alexander looked at the billing reference. No surprise. That bothered me more than surprise would have. No. Sterling Strategic Holdings paid for it. I can see that. I cannot. Because after 3 years of managing your schedule, coordinating your executives, and learning more subsidiaries than any sane person should know, I have never heard of Sterling Strategic Holdings. Alexander was silent. So either someone stole your name, I continued, or you have been lying to me. Those are not the only possibilities. Then give me another one. He walked to his desk, opened his laptop, and entered a password I deliberately looked away from. A financial ledger appeared. He turned the screen toward me. Sterling Strategic Holdings is a private holding company. It does not conduct public business. Who can access it? 8 people can authorize transactions. Including you? Yes. And did you authorize this one? No. The answer came without hesitation. I wanted to believe him. That annoyed me too. Alexander enlarged the transaction. The payment had cleared Wednesday afternoon. Authorization credentials were valid. Nothing looked unusual except the purchase itself. Someone inside your company ordered a custom wedding dress in my measurements, I said. Or someone wants us to believe that. Us. I noticed the word. Alexander closed the laptop. You are staying at my penthouse tonight. I almost laughed. There it is. There what is? The part where concern becomes an order. This is not negotiable. Everything involving my life is negotiable. His eyes sharpened. Claire, someone knows where you work, what size you wear, and how to access a private account connected to me. Then tell me what you know and let me make my own decision. I am trying to keep you safe. By deciding for me? He said nothing. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You employ me, Alexander. You do not own me. The silence afterward felt enormous. Rain tapped against 47 floors of glass. Alexander's expression did not change, but something behind. It did. For once, he was not looking at me like an employee refusing instructions. He was looking at me like a person whose answer mattered. Fine, he said finally. You can go home. I blinked. That was easier than expected. Daniel will remain nearby. Alexander. Nearby, Claire. Not inside your apartment. Not outside your door. Nearby. I considered arguing, then decided I had already won enough territory for one night. Fine. He nodded once. I picked up my purse. Before reaching the elevator, I turned back. Who are the other 7 people? Alexander's face became unreadable again. People I have trusted for years. The elevator doors opened behind me. Then maybe you should start asking whether they earned it. His gaze followed me until the doors closed. 40 minutes later, I reached my apartment building in Queens. Daniel's car stopped half a block away, exactly as promised. I was searching for my keys when my phone vibrated. Unknown number. My stomach tightened. There was no photograph this time. No instruction about Friday. Only 5 words. Ask Alexander about your father. 5 words should not have been able to erase 12 years of certainty. Ask Alexander about your father. I stood beneath the weak light outside my apartment building and read the message again while rain whispered against the sidewalk. My father, Thomas Bennett, had been dead since I was 15. He had worked in corporate accounting, complained about the Yankees when they lost, and believed duct tape could repair almost anything. There was nothing mysterious about him. At least, that was what I had always believed. Across the street, a gray sedan sat beneath a broken streetlight with its engine running. I had noticed it when Daniel's car turned onto my block. Now I noticed the small dent near its left rear bumper. I photographed the license plate without raising my phone too obviously, then went inside. I barely slept. By 7 the next morning, I had convinced myself the message was manipulation. By 8, I knew manipulation only worked when it touched something real. I took the subway into Manhattan because routine felt like the last thing I still controlled. Coffee from the same corner shop, same entrance to Sterling Tower, same elevator. Then I saw the gray sedan again through the lobby windows. Same dent, same plate. My fear became focus. I sent the photograph to myself and went straight upstairs. Alexander was already in his office. I walked through his door without knocking. Good morning, he said. That depends. I placed my phone on his desk. Someone followed me home. He stood immediately. I enlarged the photograph. This car was outside my building last night. It is downstairs now. Alexander studied the plate, then looked at me differently. Not like someone waiting to be protected, like someone who had brought him evidence. He called Daniel. Trace this plate. Quietly. I waited until he ended the call, then opened the anonymous message. Now you answer me. Alexander read it. His expression changed so slightly most people would have missed it. I did not. What does my father have to do with you? Claire, do not use my name to buy yourself time. He leaned back against his desk. What did Thomas tell you about Hawthorne Consolidated? My stomach tightened. That it was the company where he worked before he died. Anything else? He was an accountant. He left 6 months before his death. Alexander looked toward the windows. Wrong move. You know something. Before he could answer, Daniel entered carrying a tablet. The gray sedan is leased through a New Jersey fleet company. The account connects to Victor Hale. I knew Victor's name. He attended private meetings with Alexander twice every month, meetings I was instructed never to interrupt. Why would Victor follow me? Daniel glanced at Alexander. That glance was enough. Stop doing that, I said. Doing what? Alexander asked. Deciding what I am allowed to know. Silence settled over the office. Finally, Alexander crossed to a locked cabinet behind his desk. He removed an old leather folder and placed it in front of me. Inside were financial records, faded newspaper clippings, and photographs from more than a decade ago. He pulled one photograph free. Two younger men stood outside a Manhattan office building. I recognized Alexander's father from portraits. Upstairs, the man beside him made my breath disappear. My father, younger than I remembered him. Navy tie, crooked smile. Alive. Why do you have this? My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. Alexander remained across the desk, leaving the photograph between us. Because Thomas Bennett was not simply an accountant at Hawthorne. I looked up. Then what was he? He helped my father trace money moving through companies that were never supposed to exist. The room seemed suddenly colder. Did you know who I was when you hired me? No. I discovered the connection 8 months later. Anger cut through the confusion. You knew for more than 2 years and said nothing? Your father wanted you kept outside this world. You never knew my father. Alexander's eyes dropped to the photograph. My father did. I looked again at Thomas Bennett standing beside a Sterling, 2 lives I had believed could never have touched. Then Alexander said the one thing that made the anonymous message feel less like a threat and more like a door opening beneath my feet. Claire, your father did not simply leave Hawthorne 6 months before he died. Someone removed every trace of him from their internal records. Someone had erased my father from Hawthorne, but they had not erased him from the dress. The thought came to me while I stood beside the conference table staring at the white fabric beneath the office lights. Alexander was still talking to Daniel about old company records, but I barely heard them. Something about the dress had bothered me since the first night. Not the fit, not the label, the weight. When I had lifted it from the box, one side had felt slightly heavier. I reached for the hem. Claire, Alexander said. Wait. I ran my fingers slowly along the stitching. My mother had taught me basic sewing when I was 16, mostly because she believed everyone should know how to replace a button and repair a torn seam. Most of the stitching was flawless. Then I found 6 inches that were not. This was opened after it was finished. Alexander came closer. How can you tell? The thread is different. I found a loose end and carefully worked the small section open. Something stiff rested between the layers of fabric. I reached inside and pulled out a folded photograph. For a moment, nobody spoke. The picture was old, its colors softened by time. 2 men stood outside Hawthorne consolidated beneath a brass sign. Alexander's father was on the left. Mine stood beside him. Thomas Bennett looked younger than in the photograph Alexander had shown me, but I knew that crooked smile immediately. My chest tightened. There is writing on the back. I turned it over. A date from 14 years earlier. Beneath it, 3 words. They both knew. Knew what? I whispered. Alexander took the photograph carefully, holding it by the edges. I do not know. My phone rang. Unknown number. Alexander looked at the screen. Do not answer. I met his eyes and accepted the call. Who is this? Silence. Then a man's calm voice. Your father left something unfinished. My fingers tightened around the phone. What did he leave? Ask Sterling why Thomas Bennett disappeared from Hawthorne 6 months before his death. The line went quiet. Wait. The call ended. I turned toward Alexander. You said someone removed him from the records. Alexander nodded once. What happened before that? He hesitated. I felt anger rise again. No more protecting me with silence. He looked at Daniel, then back at me. Thomas found financial transfers moving through shell companies connected to Hawthorne. He believed someone inside the organization was hiding them from both our fathers. Who? We never proved it. Who did he suspect? Alexander's answer came quietly. Victor Hale. I looked at the photograph again. Victor. The gray sedan. The private meetings. The anonymous messages. Every road seemed to lead toward the same man. Too many roads. I brought the photograph closer to the window where morning light was stronger. That was when I noticed the glass doors behind our fathers. A faint reflection appeared near the edge. A third man stood several feet behind them. Younger. Dark coat. Familiar face. Victor Hale. He was watching them. Daniel leaned closer. That is him. Alexander's expression became unreadable. I should have felt relieved. We had a suspect. Instead, something felt wrong. The clues were arriving too neatly, one after another, each one telling us exactly where to look. Alexander, I said slowly. What if someone wants us to find Victor? His eyes shifted to mine. Explain. I placed the photograph beside the anonymous card and the payment record. The dress was purchased through your company. The car connects to Victor. Now a photograph appears inside the dress with Victor conveniently reflected behind our fathers. I looked at the white fabric between us. This is not an investigation. Someone is writing the investigation for us. Alexander stared at the evidence. For the first time, I saw doubt replace certainty. Then Daniel's tablet sounded with an incoming alert. He read it and looked immediately at Alexander. We traced the authorization used to purchase the dress. Victor? Alexander asked. Daniel shook his head. No. The credentials belonged to Martin Cole. I knew the name. Everyone at Sterling did. Martin Cole had served as chief financial officer for nearly 15 years. That cannot be right, I said. Daniel looked at me. Why not? I remembered the company announcement, the farewell emails, the empty office on 39. Because Martin Cole retired 6 months ago. Martin Cole had retired 6 months ago, but his credentials had somehow purchased a custom dress 2 days earlier. I stared at Daniel's tablet while Alexander stood beside me, silent enough to make the room feel smaller. When was his access terminated? I asked. Daniel scrolled through the security report. His public corporate access was closed the day he left. The private holding system is different. Alexander's eyes sharpened. Different how? His authorization token was never fully revoked. Alexander looked toward the windows. That should have been automatic. It was not. I thought about the 8 people Alexander had trusted with Sterling Strategic Holdings. Someone had found a forgotten key and deliberately used it. Can you tell where the authorization originated? I asked. Daniel nodded. Manhattan. Beyond that, not yet. Alexander reached for his phone. Find Victor. No. The word escaped before I could. Reconsider it. Alexander turned toward me. Claire, look at the pattern. I placed Martin's authorization record beside the photograph. First your company, then Victor's car, then my father. Then Victor appears in the photograph. Now a retired executive's credentials. Every clue gives us another person to blame. Alexander lowered his phone, but did not put it away. Victor still connects to this. Exactly. Too perfectly. Daniel watched us without speaking. I pointed toward the dress. Who had my measurements? Alexander frowned. What? Someone paid for the dress with Martin's credentials. But that does not explain how they knew my size. I remembered the Sterling Foundation gala the previous December. My original dress had arrived too large, and Alexander's office had arranged alterations because I was attending with the executive team. The gala tailor. Daniel was already typing. 20 minutes later, he had a name. Rachel Dunn, former event coordinator. She had received my measurements from the tailor and handled vendor records for the gala. Where is she now? Alexander asked. She resigned 3 weeks ago, Daniel said. Phone disconnected. Forwarding address is false. Previous employer? I asked. Daniel looked up. Victor Hale. Alexander's expression hardened. That is enough. No, it is another arrow pointing at Victor. He stepped toward me. How many arrows do you need? One that was not placed there for us to find. Silence. I could see the argument in his face. Alexander had spent his life surviving by acting before other people could. Waiting felt unnatural to him. If someone wanted Victor exposed, I said, they could send the records directly. Instead, they sent me something personal. Something guaranteed to get your attention. Alexander's eyes moved toward the white dress. They wanted a reaction. Your reaction. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. This time the message contained an address in Brooklyn and a time. Friday, 8 o'clock. Beneath it were 4 words. Bring Alexander Sterling alone. Alexander read over my shoulder. You are not going. That is exactly the response they expect. I am not debating this. Then you still do not understand. His jaw tightened. I lowered my voice. Whoever planned this knows you. They know what makes you suspicious. They know what makes you protective. They know that if someone threatens a person under your protection, you stop asking questions and start making decisions. Alexander became very still. Daniel looked away, which told me I had said something everyone around Alexander understood, but nobody normally dared to say. They are not using you to reach me. I continued. They are using me to control you. The words settled between us. Alexander finally placed his phone on the desk. What would you do? I almost missed the significance of the question. Alexander Sterling was asking instead of ordering. We go, I said. Not alone. Daniel stays close enough to monitor everything. We do not accuse Victor. We do not react to anything we cannot prove. Alexander studied me for a long moment. Together? Together. He nodded once. My phone vibrated again. Another message appeared. Do not disappoint us. I looked at Alexander. They think you are going to arrive angry, and I am going to arrive afraid. Alexander's expression changed, the smallest trace of understanding beneath all that control. Then we disappoint them both. Friday arrived with the kind of rain that made Brooklyn look older than it was. At 7:52, Alexander's black sedan stopped across from the address on my phone. A 6-story brick building near the waterfront with dark windows and a faded brass number above the entrance. Daniel remained behind the wheel. I will monitor from here, he said. Alexander looked at me. Last chance to change your mind. Is that a request? His mouth tightened slightly. Yes. Then my answer is no. Something almost resembling approval crossed his face. At exactly 8, we entered. The lobby smelled like old wood and rain. One elevator worked. It carried us to the 3rd floor, where a single conference room glowed beneath a yellow ceiling light. Victor Hale was waiting inside. Silver hair, dark suit, perfect posture. He looked more like a retired senator than the man every clue had been pointing toward. Claire Bennett, he said. You have your father's eyes. Alexander moved half a step ahead of me. I touched his sleeve. He stopped. Victor noticed. Interesting. I placed the old photograph on the table. Did you send this? No. Did you send the messages? Some of them. Alexander's expression hardened. Rachel Dunn worked for you. 7 years ago. Her records led us here. Victor leaned back. Then someone wanted you here. Alexander started forward. My hand found his sleeve again. We agreed. He looked at me, then stepped back. Victor smiled faintly. Thomas would have liked you. You knew my father? Well enough to know he asked the wrong questions at the right time. I felt my chest tighten. What did he discover? Victor slid a folder across the table. Inside were old financial transfers, internal access logs, and copies of Hawthorne records. Thomas discovered someone was moving money through private accounts while making it appear that I authorized the transfers. Who? That was the problem. The records always pointed to someone convenient. I looked at Alexander. The same pattern. Victor continued. 3 weeks ago, Rachel called me. She said someone inside Sterling had reopened Thomas Bennett's files. Where is she? Alexander asked. I do not know. But she told me one thing before disappearing. The person responsible did not want your money, Alexander. He wanted your alliances. The room went silent. I looked through the documents. Victor, Martin Cole, Rachel. Each name was a trail. Each trail led away from whoever remained safely inside Alexander's organization. Who knew we were coming tonight? I asked. Daniel, Alexander said. You. Me. Who can see your security schedule? Alexander's eyes narrowed. Senior operations. I thought about 3 years of calendars and approvals. One name appeared everywhere because he was supposed to. Charles Mercer, Alexander's chief operating officer. 23 years with the Sterling family. Trusted enough to become invisible. Charles approves executive security changes, I said. Alexander went completely still. Victor watched him carefully. Now she sees it. Alexander reached for his phone. I am calling Charles. No. His. I snapped toward mine. Claire. That is what they want. Every clue was designed to make you confront someone before you had proof. If Charles is involved, I will handle it. How? He did not answer. I stepped closer. If protecting me turns you into someone worse, then you are not protecting me. The words landed harder than I expected. Alexander stared at me. For once, I could see the conflict behind his silence. The man he had always been wanted action. The man he was becoming understood restraint. Slowly, he lowered the phone. What do you suggest? For words. Quiet. Simple. Yet Victor's expression changed because he understood what they meant. Alexander Sterling was asking his secretary what came next. I looked down at the access logs and noticed something strange. Every suspicious transaction had been approved on a date Alexander was outside Manhattan. We leave, I said. We let whoever planned this believe you blamed Victor. Alexander followed my gaze to the dates. And then, Monday morning, you walk into Sterling Tower like nothing happened. I closed the folder. Then we watch who panics when you refuse to become the man they planned for. Monday morning, Alexander Sterling arrived at 8:20 exactly, as if Friday night had never happened. Same black suit. Same measured steps. Same expression that made people straighten before he spoke. I was already at my desk with coffee cooling beside my keyboard, watching the 47th floor wake around us. Over the weekend, Daniel's digital forensics team had quietly reconstructed access logs from Sterling Strategic Holdings, Executive Security, and the old Hawthorne archive. Nobody outside the three of us knew what they had found. At 9:12, the first mistake appeared. Daniel called my desk. Someone just accessed Mr. Sterling's private travel calendar using Martin Cole's credentials. I kept my voice steady. From where? Inside Sterling Tower. 39th floor. Senior Operations. I walked into Alexander's office without knocking. He looked up from a contract. Our ghost came to work. He closed the folder. Martin. His credentials. Internal connection. Floor 39. Alexander reached for his phone, then stopped himself. Progress. What do you suggest? He asked. We wait. He hated that answer. I could see it. He nodded anyway. Daniel's team restricted the network without alerting the user and traced the workstation. 23 minutes later, we had another name. Rachel Dunn. She had not simply disappeared. She had deliberately gone off the grid, then returned that morning using temporary consulting credentials approved through Senior Operations. Approved by whom? Alexander asked when Daniel entered. Daniel placed a report on the desk. Charles Mercer. Silence. I knew Charles almost as well as anyone in the building. Alexander's chief operating officer. 23 years with the Sterling family. Earl Grey tea every Tuesday. A wife named Margaret. 2 grandchildren whose photographs sat beside his computer. Ordinary details made betrayal harder to recognize. There is more, Daniel said. Martin Cole had not retired voluntarily. He had been quietly removed after questioning irregular transfers 6 months earlier. Someone later kept his private credentials active and used them as camouflage. Charles had administrative authority over that system. Alexander stared at the report. And Rachel? Her consulting company received payments authorized through accounts Charles controls. The pattern finally closed. Victor had been the perfect enemy. Martin had been the perfect ghost. Rachel had been the perfect messenger. And I had been the perfect pressure point. Charles had never needed Alexander to believe one lie forever. He only needed him angry long enough to fracture the alliances surrounding him. Alexander stood. Bring Charles upstairs. I looked at him. He exhaled slowly. For a meeting, he added. With counsel present. I smiled despite myself. You really are learning. Charles arrived 30 minutes later. There was no dramatic confrontation. No threats. Alexander placed the records in front of him while corporate counsel and an independent investigator documented everything. Charles denied involvement until Daniel presented the access history, payment authorizations, and Rachel's consulting records. After that, his answers became shorter. By late afternoon, his access had been revoked, relevant accounts were frozen through legal channels, and the evidence was preserved for formal review. It felt almost disappointingly quiet. Maybe that was the point. Alexander had won without becoming the man Charles expected him to be. At 6:40, Alexander asked me to come to his penthouse. An envelope waited on the table. What is this? I asked. Your resignation papers. My stomach dropped. You are firing me? No. He turned the envelope toward me. They are signed. 1 year of severance. Full benefits during the transition. A recommendation without conditions. I stared at him. Why? Alexander walked to the door and opened it. Because I kept telling myself that protecting you gave me the right to decide what was best for you. His voice softened. It does not. I looked at the open doorway, then back at him. And if I leave? Something moved behind his eyes, but he did not hide behind an order this time. Then I let you leave. No command. No bargain. No claim. I picked up the envelope. If you stay, Claire, he said quietly. It has to be because the door was open. I walked toward him, stopped for 1 second, then stepped through it. Alexander did not follow. For the first time in 3 years, Monday morning arrived without Alexander Sterling on my calendar. 6 weeks had passed since I walked through his open door carrying resignation papers I never expected him to sign. I found a new position at a nonprofit financial foundation in Midtown, where nobody needed encrypted phones, and the most dangerous emergency was usually a donor changing a lunch reservation. My apartment was still small. I still took the subway. I still bought coffee from the corner shop that always spelled Claire with 2 letters wrong. Ordinary had never felt so precious. Alexander did not call. He did not send security. He did not appear outside my office pretending coincidence. He kept his promise so completely that sometimes I hated him for it. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, reception called. "Claire, there is a delivery for you." My hand froze above my keyboard. What kind of delivery? Large. White box. For one ridiculous second, I was back on the 47th floor with rain against glass and a wedding dress measured perfectly for a future I had never chosen. I walked to reception slowly. The box was smaller this time. No ribbon. No mystery. A return address was printed clearly in the corner. Sterling Tower. I opened it. Dark blue fabric rested beneath plain tissue paper. I recognized it immediately. My old work dress. The one I had left in Alexander's office closet after changing for the Sterling Foundation gala months earlier. It had been cleaned, pressed, and folded with almost absurd precision. On top sat a simple white card. Dinner? No orders this time. I laughed. Actually laughed, standing beside the receptionist while 6 weeks of complicated feelings finally became something simple. There was a phone number beneath the message. Not Alexander's assistant. Not Daniel. Alexander's personal number. I waited until 5:30 before sending 3 words. Friday, 7:30. His response arrived almost immediately. Your choice of restaurant. I smiled again. Progress. I chose a small Italian place in Queens where reservations were optional and nobody cared about tailored suits. Friday evening, I arrived wearing a green dress I had bought myself. Alexander was waiting outside. Alone. No black sedan at the curb. No Daniel nearby. No intimidating entourage. Just Alexander in a dark coat, looking strangely uncertain. You came, he said. You asked. There is a difference. A very important one. His mouth curved into the smallest smile. We walked inside. Dinner lasted 3 hours. He told me Charles Mercer had been formally removed and the financial records connected to my father had been turned over for independent review. My father's name had finally been cleared of questions I never knew existed. Alexander had also separated several legitimate Sterling businesses from the old private network his father left behind. You changed everything, I said. He shook his head. You made me look at what I was choosing. Outside, the rain had stopped. We stood beneath the restaurant awning while traffic moved along the wet street. Alexander looked at me, then held out his hand without touching mine. May I? Such a small question. From another man, it would have meant almost nothing. From Alexander, it meant everything. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed gently around mine, but he did not pull me closer. He simply waited, leaving the distance between us for me to decide. So I stepped forward. Alexander's eyes searched mine, almost as if he needed one final answer. I gave it by rising slightly onto my toes and kissing him. For one heartbeat, he remained perfectly still, surprised by a choice he had not made for me. Then he kissed me back, slowly and gently, one hand still holding mine while the other rested lightly at my waist. There was no urgency in it, no demand, nothing taken before it was offered. Just warmth beneath the restaurant awning, the quiet sound of traffic on rain-darkened pavement, and 6 weeks of distance disappearing in a single kiss. When we finally pulled apart, Alexander stayed close but did not hold me there. Was that my choice or yours? He asked softly. I smiled. Mine. A quiet laugh escaped him, and I realized I had almost never heard that sound before. Months earlier, someone had chosen a dress, a time, and a future for me without asking. I had mistaken power for the ability to control what happened next. Alexander had too. Standing there beneath ordinary streetlights, his hands still warm around mine, I finally understood something my father might have understood long before me. Real power was not making someone stay. It was opening the door and trusting them to choose. Alexander could command a room with silence. But that night, he simply waited. And I chose him.